Welcome to the Burn Bootcamp podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Klein, co-founder and CEO, along with my husband and company visionary, Devin Klein.
And together, with our amazing team, we are going to help you push past your limits, not just physically in our gyms, but right here, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually on the Burn Bootcamp podcast.
Together, we will take on challenges and break through barriers to transform into the best possible version of ourselves. We are more than a gym. We are a community. Your community. Let's go, Burn Nation.
Hey, Burn Nation, and welcome back to the Burn Bootcamp podcast. As you guys know, we've been talking over the last month or two about bringing on the industry experts to really help you go deep in your knowledge. And we understand that an educated member is a retained member. We want you to want us. We don't want you to need us. We want you to be equipped with all of the information that you need in order to live your best life, happy and healthy. And so today I have a very special guest. Her name is Dr. Nicole, and for over a decade, she has been a pioneer, y'all, in integrative approaches for mental and emotional wellness, two of the big pillars at Burn Bootcamp that we talk about. With a degree in clinical psychology and a license in naturopathic, she is a naturopathic physician in the state of Arizona. I have to ask you what Burn Bootcamp location that you're closest to as we get going here. But clearly your approach to mental health is multidisciplinary, from medical, psychological, holistic. And not only is Dr. Nicole a leading expert in trauma-informed clinical psychology and holistic medicine for anxiety and panic, but she's also the author of a brand new book, Panic Proof, just launched October 8th. Congratulations to you. And you also have a podcast as well. The podcast is out, and actually you have a co-host. I tapped on a couple episodes to do some research, and you have an amazing podcast. I think there's like 128 episodes there. So you can get more of Dr. Nicole post this interview. Just a quick background for her, because I want to go right in with her when we get started, you guys. Dr. Nicole attended Luther College. She obtained her degree in psychobiology. Okay, psychobiology. That's such an interesting discipline. So we can maybe talk about that here in the podcast. The next step in her journey took her to the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, where she studied clinical psychology. So then graduating, working as a group rehab counselor with teenagers at Rush Behavioral Health, where life ended up changing drastically for her. And after helping some of her patients, she started to realize that the pill for every ill model wasn't working too great. And she felt there was some ways outside of giving people just medicine to help with their illness. As we know, we think exercise is the best medicine around here. And she discovered naturopathic medicine. All right. And she studied and studied and studied and studied and studied and continues to study, attended the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine, now known as Sonoran, am I saying that correctly? University of Health Sciences. So wow, quite a background, lots of education, lots of study, and lots of expertise that she is going to bring here to the podcast. Dr. Nicole, we're so excited to have you here on the Burn Bootcamp podcast with us today.
Thank you. I'm thrilled. I love your guys' work. It's so great. And I refer my clients over to you all the time because it's so important to tend to the body, to tend to your physical structure that you live in. And so many people who work in mental health just want to focus on the shoulders up. And so I'm grateful for your guys' contributions.
Yeah, I always tell our members that you need to be aware of the mind-body connection, but you don't need to make it. It's already there, and you can't have a mind without a body and without that connection. And so many of our members obviously come to the gym for, maybe they start because they have this maybe physical need, but they're connected to the gym forever and for always because we introduce to them a barrier. We introduce to them this little thing called a workout that maybe induces a little bit of a doubt or anxiety, right? And when you overcome that doubt or overcome that anxiety, you become a person that can overcome things. So we have such an amazing conversation ahead of us, and I want to set the table for everybody. And I kind of want to start at the top of the stairs, and I want to walk down the basement into the depths of your knowledge. And I want to take the Burn Bootcamp members and those who are not Burn members that are fans of the podcast. We also have an on-demand membership where if people are not located around our 400 gyms, they're tuning in as an on-demand member too. So that's really exciting for us. But we have to start, Dr. Nicole, at here's a good question. what is anxiety and what is anxiety not?
Mm, Anxiety is a solution. Anxiety is not a problem,
Mm, mm,
which is a complete paradigm shift from what we see in the dominant medical model is we get symptoms. Doctors want to relieve symptoms. And so they look at the symptoms and they figure out how to make them go away. And so they say that anxiety is a problem. And if you look at all the research online, if you ask the question, can my anxiety go away? A lot of the medical model will say no. Anxiety is just you just live with it, you just manage it. And the whole premise of my work, everything that I've been doing for the past decade plus, is to try to teach people how that paradigm is not only fundamentally incorrect, but that we have so much research that shows us the opposite, that anxiety is the solution to the opportunity to more deeply heal. And I'm excited to dig into that.
yeah, yeah. Let's do that. So a solution. Elaborate on that. So anxiety is a solution. Most people look at anxiety and they think it's something that's wrong with them. They have, yeah, I have anxiety, or even worse, I am anxious. Like they almost like define
Mm.
themselves as somebody who is anxious. What do you think about that? And is when you say anxiety is a solution, does this mean that discovering or the awareness of the anxiety is actually the starting point to actually healing the anxiety, or am I off?
Oh my gosh, this is so good. So, when your body is trying to heal itself, it's going to give you information about that process. So, in an example that we all know is that when we get exposed to a food that maybe we're sensitive to, and like some people, they have peanuts,
Hmm.
right? And then they have a
My
rash,
niece has
or
it very bad.
maybe
My niece has a peanut allergy very bad. Yes.
so the body tells us
Right.
that. So the body is going to show us with
Right.
symptoms that we're having an immune response. And so we've evolved that when we get those symptoms, we eat a peanut, we have an anaphylactic response, or we get a rash, or whatever it is, then we're like, oh, probably shouldn't eat peanuts. As
Right.
opposed to, oh, the skin rash is a complete problem. I don't even care about what precipitated it. We're just going to take hydrocortisone and not pay any
Mm.
attention to what that's in response to. So, anxiety, similarly, occurs in response to a deeper imbalance. And the symptoms of anxiety in their unique presentation tell us exactly how to heal. It's just our jobs
Mm.
to decode what that means.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense when you put it in that metaphor. That makes a lot of sense. So, like, let's go
Mhm.
deeper on the word heal. What do you mean
Mhm.
when you say, anxiety is, something that is trying to inform us that we need to heal? What do you see in your clinical practice is the most common things we need to heal from?
Let's use two examples. So let's say that somebody comes in to the doctor and they have a really terrible headache. And so the doctor gives them acetaminophen. They give them something for the pain and the headache goes away. So the question is are they healthier? Have they healed in some way, or was the symptom just suppressed? So let's say that that same person, they have a headache again the next day, and then they go to a different doctor who checks their cervical spine and asks them more questions. And it turns out that they were rear ended and they have horrible whiplash and that their neck is out. And so then they can start to use the data from the body to put the neck back, to work with the musculoskeletal system to repair that. And so the outcome may be the same in that there's pain and symptom reduction, but the way that we address that is totally different. One is we suppress the symptoms, and the other is that we use the symptoms to tell us what's going on, and we corrected that underlying imbalance, making arguably the person stronger, healthier, more resilient.
Yeah, and anxiety, what I hear you saying kind of overall is anxiety's sneaky and you can't necessarily see it, so therefore it's treated differently societally and medically than something that you can see. And so you're giving these examples of like, yeah, it's pretty obvious when you have a headache because you can, like there's symptoms of that. Like people aren't as self-aware around, it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're not as self-aware. The emotional intelligence isn't as high around anxiety because like, and maybe you can talk to me about this in a package because, when you think about like, who made the hierarchy of emotions from like love and enlightenment down to like guilt and shame. Like anxiety's got to be somewhere on
Mm.
that spectrum. I forget. Maybe Tony can pull it up for us if he's listening in, and send it to my text message. I forget who it was, but there. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's that range, that spectrum of emotion. Is anxiety emotion? Is it a it seems to be a feeling. I saw the movie In and Out 2 with my daughter, or Inside Out 2 with my daughter, and anxiety was like the featured character in that movie. And it was this emotion that kind of it was depicted as disrupting everything. So where is it in that spectrum? And when you say it's a solution, talk about the other side. Like how do you convince people that it's not a problem, and when they're so convinced that it
Yeah.
is? Sorry, that's a lot, but just take that wherever you want.
I need to see this hierarchy. The first thing that was coming to mind is Maslow's, but I don't know if Maslow's hierarchy is what you're talking
It's
about.
not.
So hopefully
I'm
we
gonna
can
find it.
find
I'm
it.
gonna find it.
So while I answer some of the brilliant questions, you find it. And so then you're talking about Inside Out and how we're able to identify anxiety. And what I really like is that they're looking at internal family systems, which is a therapeutic approach to understanding what anxiety is. And this is so good because we can do better in healthcare at understanding our symptoms. And with anxiety, it's just a giant bucket. It's, oh, you feel nervous, you feel aroused, activated, and you have all these symptoms which could fill pages. And we don't really know. Take this antidepressant, take this benzodiazepine, maybe go to counseling. If you have a really good doctor, they're like, maybe work out, exercise your body. But the organizational structure that we have for anxiety has room for improvement. And the research is showing us that anxiety can be categorized more precisely. And so if we understand, oh, your anxiety shows up in this way, it might be caused by this. Or if your anxiety shows up in that way, it might be caused by something different. May I give two
Please.
examples? So let's say that somebody who's listening, maybe you experience anxiety every time fall happens. It's like your witching hour. You're like, fall is coming. I know it's going to be terrible. I always get horrible allergies. I stop sleeping and I'm more anxious. I haven't changed my foods. I haven't changed my lifestyle. I don't know what's going on. So if you go to the general practitioner and they're like, well, we don't, it's you're anxious and you have allergies, take a Benadryl and take a Zoloft, right?
Hmm.
So now you don't have as many allergies and maybe you're sleepy and you're also feeling like a zombie because now you're on an antidepressant, so your libido is worse, you're gaining weight, you just feel less like yourself. And it's because of this fall thing that's happening. So, what if we looked at what the research is saying a little bit more carefully and we understand that that same chemical, histamine, that can cause allergies can also cause such extreme autonomic arousal that it can look like panic attacks, it can look like insomnia. And so then if we take that and we go deeper, we could say, well, why is the body telling me histamine is high? So now we have more investigation. We can look at histamine coming into the body. We can look at how the body or the gut microbiome is producing histamine, and we can look at histamine detox. So now suddenly we're able to look at the symptoms really precisely and identify why we might be getting the symptoms we're getting, like anxiety. So that's one example.
So all anxiety isn't created equal, is what you're saying, and you have correct.
Yeah.
So you have 9 different. I was on your website, and
Yeah.
so this is what you're starting to get into. You have 9 different ways that anxiety shows up, and kind of the pathology of that from a biochemistry standpoint. You're able to kind of like
Yeah.
uh, bifurcate, categorize more deeply these 9 different
Yeah.
anxieties, so that you can then more prescriptively um, how would you say, treat and diagnose your patients. Am I following you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
we can get to the root cause. And so when we look at movies like Inside Out, they're looking specifically at how our anxiety can be like a nice encapsulated presentation. And I like to use this example when we think about why is it that sometimes I want to go to dinner with my family and my body just decides it's going to hijack me. It just decides that we're going to have heart palpitations. We're restless. Maybe you're looking around the room, you're seeing what people are doing, you can't pay attention. And so in Inside Out, they've given us the gift of being able to look at that whole, we use the term in psychology, that gestalt, or we could say that whole presentation, and we can get curious about it. And so now that we can identify anxiety, and now that we see anxiety, and we see that it has wants, desires, drives, behaviors, it can be this whole separate thing that may feel different from when you're watching movies on a Friday night. Now we could be like, okay, anxiety, what are you trying to tell me? What is going on underneath the surface? And so instead of just putting it in a big bucket of, I don't know, take this drug, now we can break it down. And I've created 9 categories for conversation. And so the one that we were talking about with histamine is immune system anxiety, because there's so much research out of a field. Here's the big word coming out of a field called psychoneuroimmunology. And the whole field of psychoneuroimmunology has studied for decades the relationship between the brain, the nervous system, the immune system, and how we feel. And if we could just lean into that in a way that's easy to understand, empowering, and reproducible, then the entire world, the whole conversation of anxiety will change. Instead of it's a problem, it's the body's solution to a
Well,
problem.
I love how you are incorporating like the actual conversation. Like you're taking anxiety and you're separating it from the self, and you're looking at it.
Yes.
You're looking at it consciously, almost like you're having a conversation with it. And just the mere separation of that, I'm sure, is helpful for so many people who aren't who have never gone down the path of self awareness, or as Carl Jung says, like your shadow self, like being able to like talk to yourself. And I do that a lot during business meetings and try to like replay, like, why did I feel the way that I felt? What were you doing over there? Why did you know, why were you so short? Or why didn't you say enough? Or why'd you feel a certain way? So I love how you just are incorporating self awareness into the actual practice. That's one thing that I think is a huge buzzword, right? It's like self awareness, but no one teaches you really how to what it means first and foremost, how to be aware of the self or socially aware, and then actually how to do it. And so I love that you have that conversation with anxiety. I have so many questions for you, and I'm going to try to stay organized here in my line of questioning. But let's go here next before we go into the deeper into the 9 ways. If you'd like to go that way, I think that'd be really interesting to learn more about what types of anxiety you can have conversations with, and you can set that stage for us. But I have a question because I'm not an anxious person. And so my first question is, and I know people, I don't have anxious tendencies or I don't have feelings of anxiety. I know people who label themselves, I'm anxious all the time. I've got 2 kind of more macro questions. And that's the first one is like, I believe that everybody has the capacity for anxiety or to feel anxious. If some people have a proclivity to not really ever feel it, is that a bad thing, or is that a good thing, or is it neither good nor bad?
That's so great. I think about one of the myths that I write about in my book is the biggest myth about anxiety is that you don't have it. And you may not, because you've done so much, like your life is dedicated to this work. And so it's really possible that you've done the work where you are regulated and that you've ended anxiety. And I could talk about, is that actually real? Can we actually end anxiety? It's on the cover of my book. And that's the first question I get is that really realistic? And the second thing is that anxiety exists on a spectrum. And so a lot of people, they talk about my panic came out of nowhere, or I have no idea. My body just decided to rebel against me and produce anxiety. And so a way to explore this is with the image of a stoplight. And so the green light is going to represent when you feel really calm in the body. You feel like there could be mayhem abound. We have an election coming up. We have climate stuff that's being discussed. There's lots of anxiety provoking things in our environment. And when you're in the green zone, you're able to notice that and not be disturbed. You're able to stay in your grounded, centered, powerful self and take that information and make it actionable. Like, what can I do? Instead of feeling frightened and disempowered. So that's the green zone. You notice everything. You're not completely shut off, and you notice it and you're okay. And then when we start to get a little bit more aroused, and by aroused, I mean activated, it's where your body is starting to say, there's something going on here. Maybe we should make some cortisol, maybe just a little bit more adrenaline. And so then we start to go into the yellow zone. And so that could present very differently for people. But if you can identify your yellow zone, like what's that first sign of it, then you're able to do the strategies to recover your centered balance before it gets any more intense. And so your yellow zone, you're getting more activated, and then the red zone is crisis. And so that's what most people, when they're talking about anxieties, they're like, I don't get panic attacks. I don't have anxiety attacks. I don't find myself in the red zone. And that's amazing. And you're regulating it. And then for those others, if we can start to become really attentive to what's happening in the mind and the body, we can prevent red zone in many cases. Or if we do get into the red zone, it's more valid for the situation, like fear, like, oh, there's an actual tiger chasing me, as opposed to I'm just driving in traffic.
No, that is such a great way to conceptualize it. And what I hear you saying is that everybody does have humans have the capacity for anxiety, and you can't eliminate the stoplight in your example, but you can keep it in the green and you can keep it in the yellow zone. And if you're really good and experienced and seasoned at self-awareness, and you are tend to be more emotionally intelligent, which we talk about on the podcast all the time. The difference between IQ and EQ. Can't really grow IQ. EQ is your secret weapon because you can do something about it, and that's a lot of why I'm so interested in your work, because I think anything that we can control, we should try to do something about it. And so that's great. I love that metaphor. I'm not going to forget that. I hope you guys aren't going to forget that out there either. I have one more kind of macro question before we jump into the 9 ways and just let you riff for a minute there. So, I believe all the research I can find, and obviously studying your stuff ahead of this podcast, it's a big part of your book. And there's like, maybe you don't language it exactly this way, but this is what I pick up is that, yeah, anxiety can 100% be genetic. Like there's a genetic anxiety. There's like a whole classification. You obviously know much more than I do, but then there's also this kind of environmental, epigenetic, belief system driven types. And let me give you an example. So I was doing a focus meeting, which is a burn bootcamp way of sitting down with the member, and and I started to get these types of questions that you're getting. And so I had to start to become this armchair expert, right? And not give out clinical advice or anything, but just help people like kind of traffic control and point them in the right direction. And so I've been a student of psychology from just a fan looking in and just really learning a lot about it. Mostly for my members and myself, coming from where I came from, in poverty-driven environment. So it was very easy for me to kind of epigenetically develop anxiety based on my father being in and out of prison and my mother abandoning the family, and my uncles, all kind of on drugs and alcohol, and just me growing up in that environment. So genetic versus epigenetic, environmental versus DNA. Like how do we know? If we have a high level of anxiety, is clinical diagnosis and treatment and prevention, with you, sometimes the only stop for people, or how much of this can we reverse based on our belief systems, based on our perspective, our worldview? I wanted to give you that example of the focus meeting, and maybe you could keep this going. So I know people learn by metaphor. So this gal sat down with me a long time ago on the podcast, and she said, I won't, it wasn't an anxiety specific example, but hopefully you get the metaphor. She said, Devin, I have chronic overeating disorder. And I'm like, who diagnosed you with chronic overeating disorder? A, is that a real thing? I asked her. B, who diagnosed you? And we ended up discovering that A, there's something similar, but that specifically isn't the diagnosis. B, it was her camp counselor from 7th grade that had no business diagnosing her. And she went from 16, 15 years old to 45 years old, believing that she was like this chronic, diagnosed with like, I am a chronic overeater. And in one focus meeting, we kind of broke that pattern. And she just had never questioned it all the way up for like 15 years. She had never questioned this. And we had that conversation, and it broke her pattern, and she was like set free. You could see this weight off of her shoulders, that she was no longer defined by this definition that somebody clinically diagnosed her that had no business doing it. And it actually wasn't genetic. It was more belief system driven. So does anxiety work the same way? That is so much right there. Go ahead, unpack. There's your platform.
I'm so moved. I'm so moved by that story. And that's exactly the conversation that we're having about anxiety. And I have a story that has stuck with me for like 15 years. And my mentor told me this. And so he had many years ago 2 women that came into his clinical practice. And they were around the same age, and they had both been diagnosed with lupus. And so lupus, for those listening that aren't familiar with it, it's an autoimmune condition, and it can range from mild to life-threatening in intensity. And so these 2 women came in, they had the same diagnosis, similar intensity of presentation. And he's like, oh, well, they're starting around the same time. This will be an interesting, just sort of back of my mind study. And so one of the women he's treating, and she's rocking and rolling. She's doing great. Her symptoms are improving. Her blood test metrics are improving. She's getting better. The other woman wasn't. And he's like scratching his head, and he's like, I'm doing all of the things that I should be doing. I'm individualizing it. I'm doing root cause. She's following the protocol. She's not getting better. And he couldn't figure it out until one day. And she was his last client of the day. And so after they finish up their visit, he's walking her to the door so he can lock up, and he sees her get into her car. And guess what he saw? So she backed out, and on her license plate, it said lupus me. Yeah.
So she believed that that was her identity.
She believed that was her identity.
And therefore, that's a strong force to be consistent with the identity that you give yourself, right? So she wasn't getting better because she believed she couldn't get, but she believed that's who she was.
She believed that's who she was.
Wow.
And so when we think about the dominant medical model's conversation about anxiety, it in and of itself is an obstacle to cure for people. I am anxiety. I have anxiety. I can only manage it. And so then people come, and I get people from all around the world, and they're like, what can I take? Just give me my top 5 supplements. What can I take to just manage my anxiety? And I always want to ask them, what is your anxiety trying to tell you needs healing, and how? Because that's a more interesting conversation.
And what is usually the answer to that? In your experience, when people really need healing, you go back to like the human archetypes, and there's not infinite amount of personalities and infinite amount of problems that those personalities experience. What needs healing? Is it our belief system? Is it our past? Like a trauma comes to mind. Like what is trauma? I think people misuse that word a lot of times as like a scapegoat for maybe not dealing with the root cause. And I don't know, what does that mean to you? When people like, what was your experience when people say I need to heal? What do they mean?
Anxiety is an adaptation. And so a really quick 3-minute exercise that your listeners can do today
Go. Got it.
is is and I tap with it, and this comes from the research in EMDR, which is a form of
Are we gonna
therapy.
do it? Are we
I
gonna
am
do
a
it right now? Are we gonna?
We're gonna do it
Oh,
right
sweet.
now. We're
I'm
gonna
in.
do it
I'm
right
in.
now.
Okay.
3-minute hack.
Okay.
And so this comes from EMDR, it comes from parts work. And so this is something you can do. So if you're experiencing an undesirable sensation, we know it's an adaptation. We just don't know what yet. So what you're going to do is you're going to notice something in your body, ideally, because the body never lies. But if it's like a thought or an emotion, something that's a little distressing to you, a little disturbing, or a sensation in the body, maybe it's tension in the gut, or maybe your heart is pounding. You're just going to notice that. And then you're going to start tapping. Do a butterfly hug for those who are listening. Is
Like
cross your
hug my
arms over your
chest. Okay.
chest.
Got you.
Yep, exactly. Like cross your chest. And then you're just going to tap on each shoulder. So you're going to notice the sensation in the body, the stress. You're going to tap. And then for the first 60 seconds, and we won't do full 60 seconds here, but for the first 60 seconds, you're just going to notice that symptom. Notice a sensation. And then you're going to ask yourself, when is the earliest time I remember feeling this way? And so then you're going to imagine going down the timeline to the very first time that you felt this way. Just for a meta experience, is there anything that you were focusing on?
Yeah, I felt a positive sensation of enthusiasm. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't notice any negatives outside of maybe my body's a little sore, but from a mental
Mm-hmm.
capacity, I noticed um, I'm enthusiastic. That's the state of being that I'm in right now.
So let's roll with
Okay.
that. So that feeling, so notice that enthusiasm, that excitement, notice what it feels like in the body. And then follow your timeline back. Imagine rewinding your tape. When is the earliest time in your life you can ever remember feeling the same way?
And I'm still tapping, right?
You're still
Okay.
tapping.
Okay, so the first time that I ever felt this level of enthusiasm was when I was able to get a college baseball scholarship, and that letter came in the mail that said, "You officially have been offered a scholarship to play baseball at Central Michigan University." That was the first time I ever felt very enthused.
That's an
Yeah,
incredible achievement.
thank you.
That's amazing. And so this part of you, he's showing up today. He's showing up today. He's giving you that excitement. He's sharing that passion with you. And so what you can do is you can mindfully bring him up in other times in your life when you feel a little less excited and confident.
Mm.
And so somebody was doing this exercise and they found a negative, yucky feeling, and they have an early part. That first 60 seconds is all about noticing the present. The second 60 seconds is all about noticing that past part, that very first time. And then the last 60 seconds is you're going to bring that part into the present. And so, hey man, for you, it's 2024. You are still rocking it today. Look at all we've done together. Look at these meaningful relationships and connections I have. And if somebody is listening to this and it's hard and that part has really struggled, is you can tell that part, you know what? You're not back in the past. You can be in the present. As 2024, I've got you. And so it can be data to reprogram your nervous system for calm, or it can reprogram your nervous system for presence.
Oh, I love
So
that.
that
I love that. That's
exercise,
so good. So you're almost like it's almost again you're going back to a natural. It's self-awareness. You're not treating you're not asking me to treat my 37-year-old self. It's my birthday today, by the way. You're
happy
Thank you. It's the best
birthday.
birthday gift I could
Yeah.
have, having you on the podcast. There we
Yes.
go. So my
Yes.
37-year-old self today isn't I'm not the same as I was when I was 17 or 16 when I got that scholarship offer, but I'm actually treating myself as I'm two separate people, and the self-awareness comes and the feelings that I had when I'm communicating. And I can
Yeah.
see how that is even more potent when you're going back, rewinding the tape and going to maybe a point in time in your life that was very traumatic. Let's say when my mother she took me and my brother and just we moved to Arizona, and we didn't tell anybody and got separated from my father. And that little kid has fears, or how would you say, nerves, or maybe it's anxiety. Maybe I do feel it sometimes of not doing enough for my kids to reverse that course. And my 37-year-old self, what you're telling me is I can go back to my 4-year-old self, my 5-year-old self in that moment and be like, hey buddy, hey listen, you're enough. You've always been enough. That had nothing to do with you. Who you were then was a little boy just trying to figure out life, and it was not your fault. And I'm so proud of you. And today, look at you now. Is that what you're saying? This is the conversations that I'm having with myself? Okay. I dig it. I
Exactly.
dig it. And I can do that every year. So anytime I feel like a emotional imbalance, I can go back, I can do this exercise, I can tap through, I can see how that tap makes it really rhythmic and meditative, and it makes you stay present. And then I got to go back, I got to grab something, and I got to have a conversation with who I am today and reconcile that. And that's what we mean by trauma. That's the answer to the question. Am I following you?
You
Okay.
are. And I would love to expand on it just a little
Please.
more
Okay.
to like really
Love you to
hit a
love
home
you to do that.
run.
Yeah.
Yes. So when we think about past adversity, whatever happened or didn't happen, we adapt to that. So the moment we're conceived, and arguably genetically, right? Because you asked this question about genetics earlier, is that we inherited a microbiome, we inherited family adversity, we inherited behavioral patterns, resources, economics. From the very moment that we're conceived and our brain is developing, it's starting to make patterns and meaning, and it's communicating with the gut. And then the gut's like, I got you. It changes. And then the gut's like, oh, by the way, brain, you need to do this. And then the brain's like, oh, yeah, histamine, got it. And so then your immune system is getting on board. And then you come into this life. And so you've popped into this life with adaptations abound. And then we go through life. And everything that happens and everything that doesn't happen, we continue to adapt to. So this could mean that maybe you inherited an, a genetic inefficiency at metabolizing folate. So maybe you have a popular genetic test is MTHFR, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase
It's a
deficiency.
big word.
So you inherit it's a that's my spelling bee word is you inherit, let's say theoretically, this genetic predisposition. And then in life, maybe you don't get the nutrients. So now that gene is activated and you get sick, right? And so the metaphor is it's like you come into life and you live in Alaska or Michigan. You were in Michigan, which that's where I am, by the way. I'm in Michigan
Oh, cool.
and
Oh,
Arizona.
cool.
So we have a lot in common.
Nice.
But it's like you put on a winter coat. So you put on a big, fluffy winter coat when it's cold, and you have an adaptation. And that adaptation is your thoughts, your emotions, your behaviors, but also your biological processes. And then what happens is then we continue to go through life, and maybe we then move to Arizona. But if the adaptations get stuck and we don't continue to adapt, it's like living in Arizona with a coat on and not taking it off, even though it's 112 degrees. And then we suffer. And so then the dominant medical model says, well, your suffering is the problem. It's not the coat. We'll just give you ice packs, right? But if we look at why am I wearing this coat? What is this coat? And how do I reprogram the body so that it doesn't need the coat anymore? Then that's true healing.
Mm.
That's true
I
freedom.
love that. I love that. And I did find, and you just mentioned suffering, which reminded me to bring up the Hawkins map of consciousness levels. So
Oh,
Yes.
Yes.
So enlightenment to shame, and then you kind of go up the scale from shame to guilt to apathy to grief to fear to desire to anger to pride, courage, neutrality, right in the middle, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, and enlightenment. And that's the scale that I was referring to earlier of kind of where anxiety fits into this is emotions and consciousness interchangeable in this situation, and is anxiety, does it fit this scale, or is it better suited on maybe a wheel of emotions or some other scale?
So you brought up Jung
Yeah,
earlier, which I'm impressed. It's amazing.
I told you,
And what Carl
armchair psychologist. I don't know near what you know, but I do like to study and read. So
Oh my gosh. And Jung is one of my heroes. And so he teaches about that which remains in the unconscious and is not brought to light will continue to affect us, and we will call it fate.
ooh, that's deep. Say that one more time. What does he say?
Yeah. What remains in the unconscious and is not brought to light will continue to affect us, and we will call it fate.
Okay, interpret that for us. What does that mean?
So the question is that you were wisely asking is the difference between consciousness and anxiety. And we've seen that so much of our emotional experience is beneath the surface of consciousness. Sometimes the brain creates so many associative networks that they're just stored in the deep consciousness of our brain. We just don't, they come out and we're like, where did that come from? Or your microbiome is like, ooh, I got you. I'm going to make a bunch of dopamine when we do this. And you're like, I don't know why I feel panicky, right? And our habits, our coats. So all of these things may be affecting us, but if we don't bring them into our conscious awareness, if we don't listen to conversations like this, if we don't do the tapping, that inner child work, if we don't look at what our symptoms are trying to tell us, all of that stuff underneath our surface of awareness is going to continue affecting us today. And then we're going to wonder why we're not getting
Mm.
better. And I think we can do better. And I think that there's ways to make it accessible for people.
I love how you're just bringing these words that we often hear, like, anxiety or heal or trauma, and actually giving some depth and some substance to them. um, in mental health, I think, is probably the biggest buzzword of all time. And it's just, there's the two school of thoughts, and like what mental health like really is versus like, I need to change from the inside out, and it's versus the I want the world around me to change so that I can be better.
Mhm.
Do you Trying to think about how I want to ask this next question. So when you are how do you address with somebody, maybe somebody who comes to you and just says like, all these environmental things around me all the time. It's, I in my world, it's, I'm not healthy because the boss brings donuts into the workplace, and, we're not empowered to work out. I'm working, I have kids, I'm busy. Then there's barbecues, and then there's golf, and then there's this and birthdays, and then Valentine's Day, and I have no time for myself. What is the common uh how do you say, signs of somebody who needs to go do the internal work rather than come to you and like expect you to like put a double stamp on all the environmental things that are going wrong in their life? Does that happen as often as I think it does? And how do you address that?
One of my favorite things I heard once is if you don't have time to meditate for 5 minutes, then you need to meditate for 30 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely
And
true.
so for those, they're like, I don't have time for any of this. And so if you don't have time to dedicate to being healthy, then you're definitely not going to have the time to be sick.
Mm.
And so it's just a matter of when you're utilizing that time and figuring out where you have control. And so when we think there's this model, it's called the stress diathesis model. I think of it as a cup, like a glass, and we all inherit a glass, and our glasses can be different sizes. And so the size of the glass is important because it's how much water it can hold. And water is all the stuff in stress, right? And so some of us, they get like a big vat. They get a huge vat, and it's like they can handle all the stress, and they're like ducks, and it rolls off their shoulders, and they're cool. You're like that. I'm probably on the smaller glass side. And so I can't hold as much water. But here's the thing is that the next part of this model is that if we add ice cubes to that glass,
Mhm.
those are factors that can either be risk factors or they could be protective factors. So think about the demand in your job that adds stress, and think about adding an ice cube that's I inherited family trauma. And then I have environmental exposure to mold. When I was in elementary school, the roof leaked, and you add that ice cube. And then I don't exercise, and so I'm sedentary, add that ice cube, right? So we can add ice cubes, and so those displace water. And so the fuller our stressors are, the less that we can withstand and we can hold. And so in your example, someone's coming in and they're listing, they have so many ice cubes that their cup is overfilling, is we have to start with what is the smallest change that we can make to give you the biggest impact so that you have the bandwidth to then go from just surviving to thriving. You
Mm.
can go from basic functioning to like your soul being on fire and
Mm.
you're showing up in this world and what you were meant for.
And there's something almost, there's an admission, and maybe this is the wrong way to say it, but there almost has to be like some admission of inadequacy or some admission of humility is the word that comes to my mind. You
Mm.
have to like be humble enough to know that maybe that you're not quite yet mentally, emotionally prepared enough to take on bigger things. And it's like, that's why just brushing your teeth, if you want to be healthy, is the first thing you should do because it's a promise that's easily achievable to yourself. And in fitness, people break promises to themselves, and that kills their confidence over time. And all of a sudden, you go from, hey, I have these big goals and dreams. I try to eat the whale whole or swallow the whale whole, and I'll lose 100. I'm gonna lose all 100 pounds in 90 days. Like, that's never gonna work. Um, that is seems to be the case in what you're saying, or at least partially the case, is that you almost have to have an admission that you're not quite there yet. You've got to be real and be honest and come to the table and say, I'm not adequate at this given skill set in life yet. Let me start with something so insignificant that I know 100% I can do this because it's small enough. And do you think people lean into that? Or do you think they lean away from that, generally speaking, based on their level of humility? Or is it too hard to tell?
I needed you in 2015. Where were you? Like this is such a profound moment for me hearing this, because this is exactly what was my rock bottom dark circle of hell moment, is that I was simply not capable of doing all of the things that I had committed to. And my body and my mind were screaming. And so I tried everything to make it stop. I took supplements, I took herbs, I did acupuncture, I exercised, I meditated. I even had an Ayurvedic practitioner pour oil on my third eye, and I just laid there and cried the entire time because I hadn't slept more than 2 hours in a week. And I had to get to that point where I just let it go. So I sold my half of the business and I moved to Michigan.
Wow.
And what a gift. Because I could have just taken all the benzos and the antipsychotics just to knock me out and zombie me out and just kept doing what I was doing. But I was able to be forced, in a sense, into the humility to realize that I just couldn't do it. And I was killing myself in the process of trying. So I needed that. And I hope people really hear that, because what you just said was so profound.
And your vulnerability too is definitely draws me in closer to you as a doctor and somebody that I would want to talk to more, because you can't transfer what you don't experience. And so I appreciate you sharing that story. And I, I wanna talk about meditation and meditation's role in anxiety. We've got maybe 6 minutes left. Can you go over 10 minutes or okay? Because this is really good,
Yeah.
and I don't want to stop it in 6 minutes because I've got a few more things I think people are really digging this right now, and we got to kind of close the loop here. So we want to go. I want to do two more things. I want to talk about you just really educating us on how you take and categorize the nine. I think that will be really
Hmm.
important for people to just learn that anxiety is not all made the same, and then talk about maybe meditations and my um, from my experience the meditation aspect of controlling emotion is the best like self-starter way. If you have a little bit of anxiety and it's not overwhelming you and you want to kind of start to do something about it, is to close your eyes and sit and stay for 10 minutes at least, or 20 minutes or so. And so I'd love to talk to you about the nine, and then I'd love to talk to you about meditation and how that plays a role in what we can actually go do today. And then we'll end on talking a little bit about the book. Okay, is that good?
I love it.
Okay, we're in
I'm
we're we're
here. Let's do
we're in the
it.
fourth quarter here. All right, so here's the talk to us about what's on your website, and we have the website in the show notes. Everybody, the website is drnicolekane.com, and you can go there and you can, I believe, take an anxiety test for free. I know
Yes.
DJ, my brand manager, has done one. I was in California all last week. I did not get a chance to do it yet, but certainly will at some point because I want to learn more. But educate us on what those nine are, about the assessment, and what we're going to learn when we do that.
Yeah. So, yeah, free quiz online and check back often because what you experience going into that yellow light zone will be really important as an early indicator. And so sometimes people are like, I'm having a panic attack. I feel all of the things. And I'm like, yeah, all of your systems are rallying to protect you from a tiger or a perceived tiger. And so you're going to feel all the nine types of anxiety. And we may find that with more research and development that the conversation expands, but this is what the research is suggesting are these nine types. And so try to pay attention to when you just get a little aroused, a little activated, what comes first. And so the first type is thought anxiety. And so this is if you find that your thoughts are looping or intrusive or racing, or maybe you get brain fog and it's like someone calls on you and you're just like, all thoughts are gone. I have no words, right? So that's thought anxiety. And the second type of anxiety is chest anxiety. And so we found that when people are having extreme panic, that it can look a whole heck of a lot like a heart attack. And so there's this research study that was done, and they looked at ER visits for individuals who were presenting with symptoms of heart attack, and 80% of them were panic attacks.
Wow.
So pounding in your chest,
Mhm.
an elephant on your chest, air hunger. So of course, go to your doctor and make sure that your heart is healthy. Don't just say you're panicking. But that being said, chest anxiety can feel like a heart attack if it's really extreme. And so then we have gut anxiety. And so some people, they get that butterflies in their stomach, or they get a knowing, or it can be really extreme where every time I write about someone named Matthew in my book whose gut anxiety was so severe he would get diarrhea every time he got anxious. And that made his world really small. He couldn't go anywhere if there wasn't a guarantee of a bathroom nearby. And so gut anxiety could also cause heartburn. And so you get reflux. So it could be something is imbalance, out of balance in the gut. And then we have nervous system anxiety. And this is really important to talk about because anxiety that's presenting in the nervous system can be really freaky. And then we get fear of the fear, even though it's a totally normal, natural process. And so this is if we get numbness or tingling. This could be headaches. This could be muscle tension. And it could be mild to pretty debilitating. I had a patient once she's public speaking. She was on stage and she had a panic attack so extreme that her vision went out for the whole rest of the talk.
That's my worst
She
nightmare.
went so,
That's my worst nightmare, to be on
yeah,
stage and go blank. Wow.
yeah,
Yeah. Did
yeah.
she? And yeah,
She got
she
better.
got better.
She totally got
Okay,
better. It
awesome.
was, her body was screaming. It was red light. She hadn't been taught to pay attention to the green and the yellow. So that's nervous
Yeah.
system anxiety. So that can be pretty
Yeah.
intense. Endocrine anxiety is anxiety that's caused by an imbalance in the endocrine system. So we're thinking thyroid. Make your doctor give you a full thyroid panel. I can't even go into the controversy that this seemingly obvious thing is. Thyroid panel, full thyroid panel, TSH, free T3, free T4, and a reverse T3. Every year, get that done. And if there's any indicators that that may be out of balance, ask for thyroid
Did you
antibodies.
all hear that?
So
Those acronyms. You got to go make sure you get the acronyms, all the acronyms done.
all the
All of them. There's
acronyms,
four. There was four of them. I'm gonna listen to this back and write that down myself.
and it's on my
Okay.
Instagram too. So if they're like, I did a video and I was like, get a full thyroid panel, and it got a 500,000 views and so much controversy. I was like, this is basic science.
Yeah.
But
Dr. Nicole Kane
yeah.
on Instagram, by the way, y'all.
Yes. And then, so it also could be sex hormones like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and it could be cortisol hormone. That's your main stress hormone. So that's endocrine anxiety. We touched on immune system anxiety. And so, immune system can cause inflammation in the brain. The brain doesn't like inflammation, so that can activate a fight, flight, freeze, flop, fawn, fracture response. Histamine, mast cells, autoimmune conditions like lupus, those could all be at the root of it. And then we have, let's see, are we missing? Then we have trauma anxiety. And so you have trauma anxiety if the main thing about your anxiety is the trauma that happened. So you have intrusive thoughts about it, you avoid certain situations associated with it, you may have nightmares. And so then you want to treat the cause using trauma therapy like EMDR.
Got it.
Is my favorite. Did we get through all
I
of them?
think
Oh,
you have
anger and
depressive.
depressive.
Yeah, anger and depressive. I'm on your site right now, about to take the quiz when we
Amazing.
get done with this. So I've got your little chart up. Yeah,
Good.
I got. Yeah, okay, got it. Anger.
People often don't realize anger can be anxiety, and it's in the fight, flight, freeze. And so we put ourselves in fighting position, we bend our arms, we straighten our legs, so we're blocking a punch or we're throwing a punch. The body is producing chemicals, and the position of the body is also creating a biofeedback loop to the brain that says that you're in danger. And so it depends on it's the chicken or the egg. Was there something in your environment that you're now in this response towards or against? Or are you just sitting at your desk and your body is in this position and you're reading your emails and you're like, why did this effing person send me 3 emails in a row? And then you're like, why am I angry? It could be that you're in a fight response, in a fight body position. And then depressive anxiety is a mix of feelings of depression, like sadness, feelings of worthlessness, feelings of hopelessness, low self-esteem, that mixes with symptoms of anxiety. So those are the 9 types.
Yeah, no, that is great, and I'm looking forward to taking the quiz so I can really dial in my knowledge around the personalization of how those 9 types of anxiety interact with my life. One thing that I have a question, and then I'll ask the meditation question, but to just close this loop, going back to the Hawkins consciousness level, you mentioned in that last answer, you mentioned acceptance and shame in 2 different references, and you seem to link anxiety to acceptance and shame. As soon as you said that, I was like, that makes sense. And tell me if I'm wrong, because when somebody is, like, let's say, accepted or they're admired, that means, okay, there's probably some success that underlies that. And I have a lot of franchise partners who went from like rolling over their 401ks into becoming millionaires, and now they have like this acceptance and admiration from people, but it's actually giving them a little anxiety because they don't think they belong there. And then they go from like acceptance like down to shame. And it's like, I had a little bit of that, so I can empathize with them for sure when we first were getting started. But I was able to curate a belief system that overcame it, and now I help them with that. But is that common? Do you see this kind of imposter syndrome? Is that what it is? Is when people
Yeah.
they get acceptance, they get admiration, but they feel guilty about it, and so now there's some anxiety up the hierarchy of positive emotion, which seems counterintuitive. Am I tracking?
I run into that all the
Wow.
time. I work with a lot of high performers, and probably 95% of my high achievers, high performers on all sorts of different domains. They feel that. So the question is how is that an adaptation? And so is it that's how they stay grounded? Is it because they were shamed and there's a part of them that believes that no matter what they achieve, they're unworthy? Is it because they know so much, they know nothing, like Socrates, and they don't know that not knowing is a good thing, and so they're labeling and their frame around that is a problem? Is it where the dopamine has been patterned to release? Are you releasing dopamine in outcome, or are you releasing dopamine in effort?
Hmm.
And then do we need to reprogram that? So that crash is, you would say, oh my goodness, body, mind, nervous system, thank you for the data in this crash. I'm paying attention, and we're going to figure out together what that's telling me needs healing and recalibrating.
Yeah, like why do I feel this way? How do I want to feel? And how do I get to where I don't want to feel to how I want to feel? That's
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, this
And you can use neuroplasticity will take you where you want to
mm,
go. But biologically, right, we can install and save the hippocampus in the
mhm,
brain that processes
mhm,
memories. It will instantaneously save something away that's bad
mhm,
and dangerous. But meditation and mindfulness, we've seen in the research, it takes like 30 seconds of being
mhm,
mindfully attuned to a win or something
mhm.
positive in order for the brain to decide that that's worth
So
saving.
by neuroplasticity, it's the abilities for the brain's neurons to make and form new connections and or get rid of old, outdated connections that you don't use. Correct? And then so
Yes.
that's really what you mean by reprogram is use
Yeah.
neuroplasticity to your advantage and realize that you can actually reprogram these electrical connections in your brain. And we do so through meditation a lot of times. And so I want to talk about that with you because I, over like the last year and a half, have become an avid meditator.
Yeah.
And I, used to have a belief system of like, I don't want to meditate because I like my brain the way it is and I don't want to reprogram it. And then I realized that no, the business started getting bigger and I was dealing with bigger problems and issues, that maybe you need to have some more mental resilience, some more emotional resilience if you're going to be the type of person that can deal, that can handle, that can thrive in these chaotic type situations. You got to be calm in the chaos. And so I started by going to the middle of the jungle and sitting out and meditating for 8 hours with a friend of mine, which was a story for another day. But that got me into meditation.
Wow.
And so I'm interested to hear what types of meditation do you think maybe beginners or intermediate or maybe even advanced that would really be prescriptive in terms of relieving anxiety. And I use the term prescriptive because I can never do that. I don't have the credentials to prescribe people stuff, and you do. So, uh, what do you think? What do you think about how people should meditate in as it relates to anxiety?
Ooh, I love meditation. My favorite form of meditation is transcendental, and so that helps me. So I had a teacher, a transcendental meditation teacher, who gave me a mantra. And so having something to focus my attention on, especially just like the rhythm, because I was trained as a musician. So the rhythm and the music of the word in my mind is so helpful for me. But for some people, that's not useful. So it's all about finding the right fit for you. Another meditation that I like is intentional meditation, where you can do a script and you could sit down and imagine I don't have imposter syndrome. Instead, I feel confident. And then you could write down what it feels like in your body. And so you get as detailed as you can, you describe that, and then record it into your phone, and record it into your phone in a voice that feels really relaxing, feels really calm for you. And then you just sit down and you notice your body and you notice your breath and you listen to yourself describing what you want. And you notice that with your eyes, because the more you fire it, the more you will wire it. And so writing it activates the brain, speaking it activates the brain, listening to it activates the brain, imagining it activates the brain, and then you fully owning that. And it can be 5 minutes or 8 hours. You get to be the person in control
I don't
of what
recommend
that
8
is.
hours. That was a test. I like 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
It's grueling. Yeah.
20 minutes will do me just good now. But you know, I definitely have practiced TM and Kundalini and a few different types. But
Yeah.
it really, for me, it has really been just the act of sitting and letting emotions dissipate and allowing myself to only be in the here and now on my breath. And I think there's a real empowerment in being in showing yourself that you're in control. And this is the
Mhm.
difficult part about meditation, is that the first time people try to do it, they sit down and they can't control their mind. And then it's like, it's useless. I can't control it anyway. It's like, well, you can't do a pull-up either unless you practice. You can't think about meditation. You can't just like think about wanting not to be anxious or to experience anxiety and then get it. You can't think or read about push-ups and get stronger. You actually have to do the work. And without people like you, Dr. Nicole, we're worse off, because now you're taking self-awareness and all of these, all the complexities that are around anxiety, such a potentially crippling emotion for people, and you're providing, like like layman's term solutions for it, right? You're not here
Yeah.
trying to, you incorporate the science, but you're not trying to science us to death, which I really, really appreciate. And it's very practical.
Yeah.
So you guys, you have to follow Dr. Nicole on Instagram. You got to get her book. Her book is on Amazon right now. It is called Panic Proof: The New Holistic Solution to End Your Anxiety Forever by Dr. Nicole Kane. And you can read I think you can read the first chapter somewhere online as well, if you'd like to. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it should be uploaded on
Okay,
Amazon.
great.
If not, I'm happy to send it to your audience. So if you can't find it, just have them ping me at hi@drnicolekane.com, and I'm happy to send it over.
Well, I have like a bajillion more questions for you, and I think I could talk to you for 6, 7 hours on end without stopping. But I know that you have to get on with your day, and I should probably get on with mine too. So let's do this. Let's do this again. This would be really good. I know this is going to be a very popular episode, so hopefully you get a lot of feedback from Bird Nation in your Instagram, just thanking you for being here. We have a small audience, but they're mighty and they're attentive and they're listening, and they really appreciate you being here. Thank you for your time.
Oh, it's an honor. I would love to come back. Let's hang out again.
Okay, let's do it again. drnicolekane.com, Dr. Nicole Kane on Instagram, and the podcast, Holistic Inner Balance. Okay? All right, you guys, thank you so much for being here. And Dr. Nicole, you can join us in 2 claps on 2. When I say 2 claps on 2, you just hit me with 2 claps, all right? Here we go, Bird Nation. 2 claps on 2. 1, 2. See you guys later.